What's up, everybody? Brandon Johnson here again, and today I wanted to talk about a topic that I think a lot of bluegrass guitarists think about a lot, and that is playing fast, specifically fast lead. You know, kind of like Billy Strings and Brian Sutton, Doc Watson, Tony Rice, guys like that. How do you achieve that kind of fluidity and speed in your playing? And there are really kind of a number of factors that go into playing really fast and really smooth. And some of them are technique related, and some of them are kind of setup related, and then other parts of them are just sort of natural musical ability that these guys have, from practicing a lot and touring for 30 years. So we'll kind of cover three main areas related to this topic, and one of them, probably one of the more important ones, is a very, very solid grasp of fundamentals. So fundamentals, as it relates to playing fast and smooth, especially in a bluegrass setting, those fundamentals would be things like tempo, timing, rhythm, those kinds of things. And those are things that you have to internalize. There are really no easy ways to kind of develop those skills other than just putting in a lot of time with the instrument. If you're playing alone for the most part, you would be well served kind of practicing to a metronome a lot. And really working on internalizing and playing a consistent tempo. And we'll cover some actual exercises related to that later on in this video. And there's sort of two other aspects related to your equipment, your setup, what kind of a live situation you're playing in, things of that nature. So if you're sitting around the house and playing guitar a lot, you might find it easy to develop a good feel for playing fast. You might be able to take a run or a piece of music and play it quite fast and quite smooth. And if you play gigs at all, you might go to the stage, plug in your guitar, and find that fluidity that you had been practicing seems to have left you. And I know this is something that I've encountered over the years many times. And so really what's happening there is you're running into a situation where, number one, you're only as good as the musicians that you're playing with. So if you're a guitar player, right, in a bluegrass band, the other musicians in your band are going to have sort of varying levels of ability and skill sets. Some of them may be very strong rhythmically, some of them may not be strong rhythmically. And ultimately, the acoustic guitar is a rhythm instrument. So if you're playing with a group of musicians that maybe don't have strong fundamentals, if you're just kind of playing on the weekend, and you're playing rhythm, and then you go to take a solo and you try to play fast, there are a number of things that can happen in that kind of a situation. One of them is sort of a common trap that bluegrass bands fall into, and that is allowing the soloist to sort of dictate the tempo of the song. So, you as the guitarist, if you go in to take a solo and you're playing 16th notes, you're trying to play really fast, and the other musicians sort of take that as a cue to speed up the tempo, that's going to basically prevent you from being able to play fast. The band isn't playing to your tempo, you're playing to their tempo. And if it goes the other way, if the band starts trying to follow you as a soloist, tempo-wise, it can really just kind of lead to disaster. You're not going to be able to take an effective solo. There's not going to be good dynamics, and it's actually going to throw off the entire band. So that's why I emphasize that, the band, the collective group of musicians, their job is to hold down the rhythm while you're soloing. And then eventually when you rejoin them rhythmically, you're all kind of in the same place that you left off on. That's one factor, and that's an important factor. So, don't try to force it in a live situation. Just try to play to the situation you're in order to create the best possible overall sound for the audience. Another aspect of this too is related to your setup. So if you're practicing at home unplugged and you're running scales and you feel like you're playing pretty fast and smooth and you're sort of liking the progress you're making, and then again you go to the stage and try to sort of replicate that, one thing you might run into is if you're using a pickup system with your guitar, which most guitarists do nowadays. And so if you're going through a sound check, let's say you're playing a show somewhere, typically the sound guy will go instrument by instrument. You'll check each instrument together and then sort of the entire band as one, and he'll sort of balance things out that way. Well, what tends to happen is if you're sound checking to an empty room and then people start to file in, that can change the dynamics, sort of the loudness of your band. And what can happen, especially as a guitarist, is that you can be sort of louded out by all the other instruments. The mandolin, the banjo, they tend to be louder in volume than the guitar. So naturally, the guitarist will try to pick harder to generate more volume. And that is a mistake that will lead you to not be able to play as fast, because you're picking harder and you're sort of exerting your muscles more, which means they're going to kind of cramp up, get tighter, and it's going to prevent you from, really having a nice light pick technique. And that's really what you want in order to play fast, is you want a very light right-hand pick technique. It's a good idea to kind of study the great pickers and the way that they sort of move their right hand. And Billy Strings is a great example of that. If you watch his right hand, it's really just as light as a feather. I mean, it's very light and sort of moving very, sort of skimming across the strings. You don't see him digging in really hard and gripping the pick really hard. He's able to use a very light right hand technique and still generate good volume. And the reason is that he's consistent with his attack. So his ups and his downstrokes are really the same volume all the time, and he's able to control that very well in a live situation. So when he sound checks and plays melodic stuff, when he plays solos and melodic runs, he's going to be using the same pick attack as he is when he's playing live. And that's kind of another thing that's related to experience and playing a lot of live shows is, a lot of times you go out on stage and you're a little bit nervous and your muscles tighten up, and that's going to prevent you from playing fast. So somebody like him who plays shows for a living, it's just another day at the office. So he goes out on stage and he has, good control over his technique, because he's done it 1,000 times before. And that goes for all the great acoustic guitarists, Tony Rice, Brian Sutton, all those guys. They had the experience to kind of enable them to control their technique and to control the volume of their picking and their pick attack in a live situation. So if we just take one single note here, we're just going to play the G here, the open G string, and we're going to try to play just ups and down strokes using a very light kind of attack. And the goal with this is to sort of make your upstrokes and your downstrokes the same volume. And what you're doing there is you're actually applying the same amount of pressure to the downstrokes and to the upstrokes. And that's an important aspect of playing fast is sort of that looseness. So you want to try to play as light as you can, but still apply the same amount of pressure to each of your upstrokes and downstrokes. Another thing you're doing there is you're practicing your subdivisions, so the distance between the notes. You want those to be very even, because if they're not even, you're not going to be able to kind of ramp up that tempo and play it faster, because they're out of sync with one another and they're not going to fit in to the kind of the overall tempo that the band is playing. So let's throw on a metronome here, and we'll kind of just practice on one string, just applying a nice light pick pressure on your downstrokes and your upstrokes, and then try to make each downstroke and upstroke land on a quarter note so that those subdivisions are very even. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So that metronome was set to 80 beats per minute. And in that example, we were playing quarter notes. So each upstroke and downstroke fell on a downbeat or on a quarter note, since there's 4 beats to a measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. So let's take that same tempo, 80 beats per minute, and let's play eighth notes. So each beat now is going to have a down and an upstroke. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that was eighth notes, right? We're playing 2 notes per quarter note. So first we did quarter notes, then we did eighth notes. Now let's do 16th notes. So 16th notes in 4/4 time means we're going to be playing 4 down and up strokes per quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So there's 2 important distinctions there. There's tempo, which was 80 beats per minute, the metronome, and then there's subdivisions, which are quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes. So if you're playing 80 BPMs and you want to play fast, more than likely you're going to be playing 16th notes. And so that means that that's a good place for you to start if you're trying to build your speed, is sort of working on your 16th notes. So let's do that. Let's play some 16th notes, but let's turn up the tempo. So we're playing the same subdivisions that we did before, 16th note subdivisions, but we're going to be increasing the tempo to 100 BPMs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So that was 16th notes at 100 BPM. You know, you're approaching some of the faster bluegrass tunes that are probably north of 120 BPMs if you're playing them in a live situation. So now let's combine some subdivisions. We'll play eighth notes and 16th notes together. We'll stick to one string here. We're still kind of thinking about your right hand technique and your subdivisions here. It's a good starting point for, you know, kind of learning how to play more complex stuff at higher speeds. But what we'll do here is we'll play eighth notes and 16th notes on a single string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. Now I want you to pay close attention there to how that feels to you. When you're sort of, if you feel like you're achieving that light, even pressure with your pick technique, and you're playing good subdivisions to the metronome, really think about how that feels in your right hand. There's no tension, there's no fatigue. You're still generating pretty good volume. So that's kind of where you want to be if you're playing in a live situation when you're sound checking. That's the kind of sort of feeling you want to try to replicate with your right hand. And what that's going to do is that's going to give you it's going to set a baseline for your performance later on in the evening. Like if you're sound checking early in the night, you want to make sure that you sound check with that nice, even attack. So you want to focus on your technique first, and then the sound guy will adjust your volume to your technique. And then later on in the show, you want to also try to match that same feeling of a very light attack and a very smooth right hand action, so that you can actually deliver that on stage. So you know, you want to make sure that your sound check, your technique during your sound check, and your technique during your performance are the same. And the way you do that is you internalize, you know, that feeling that you kind of learn in practicing. When you're practicing your subdivisions to a metronome, you want to try to internalize that feeling that you're getting with your right hand and replicate that on stage. So that's super important. So that's kind of a basic starting point for how to develop some of the fundamental techniques for how to play really, really fast, or at least how to think about playing really, really fast. We talked about having a good sense of tempo and timing, which in this case would be subdivisions. And then we talked about kind of having a nice light right hand technique, which is going to enable your right hand to move faster. If you're trying to generate volume by playing harder, you're not going to be able to play as fast because the muscles are going to be a lot tighter in your hand and in your arm. Those are things that you have to develop and really internalize, you know, through just consistent practice. But I think if you really work on your right hand technique being very light, your pick pressure being very consistent, whether you're just practicing it at home or if you're on stage, really internalizing the feeling of a light pick pressure and setting your pickup in a live situation to match your technique, to match your pick pressure, so that you don't feel like you have to play harder in order to generate volume and be heard. And then just working with a metronome and trying to get those subdivisions to be as consistent and equal as possible. If you're able to sort of work on those things and get better at those things, you'll find that it'll be a lot easier to work your soloing up to higher tempos and to play much, much faster. So I hope that was helpful to you. If it was, go ahead and drop me a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And head on over to the website, brandonjohnsonguitar.com, where I have my entire library of bluegrass guitar lesson videos available for you. So I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you next time.